A very warm welcome to you all at this news hour on Equinoxe television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Bable Jonathan, human rights lawyer, defender, trainer, president and founder of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. Barrister Agbobala condemns the abduction of 6 government workers in the Indian Division, Southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon and other citizens, and calls on the Cameroon government to take its responsibility and protect the citizens and put an end to the close to 5-year-long armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. And in news out of Cameroon, the United Nations Organization estimates that more than 35,000 persons have been killed in the 12-year-long Boko Haram conflict in the northeast of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It says more than 90% of the death victims or the dead victims are children. Details coming up next. We begin this newscast with this story concerning the mysterious death of 2 women in Twi in the Bam and Inubu Division, Central Region of the Republic of Cameroon. Meanwhile, in Bafoussam, police officers are in search of a mother who delivered her child and then threw her in a running stream. And in the Bamungu, Gabon quarter. That is what happened over there. And Smanjik and Gibre files in details on this series of human interest stories. Smanjik and Gibre with details on the mysterious death of 2 women in Twi in the Mbam and Inubu Division, Central Region of the Republic of Cameroon, and a mother who delivered a child and dumped the child in a stream in Banengo, Gabon quarter, that is in Bafoussam in the west region of the Republic. Smanjik and Gibre. We'll come back to that report in the course of this newscast. Time for us to talk about the kidnapping of 6 government workers in the Indian Division, Southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, within the context of the close to 5-year-long armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. And after one of the civil servants was killed, that is the divisional delegate of the Ministry of Planning, Economy, Planning and Regional Development. 5 others are still in captivity. Until today, the whereabouts remains unknown to the general public. What has happened to them? Difficult to answer that question. And a human rights lawyer, human rights defender, trainer, president and founder of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Central Africa, Barrister Agbobala, has condemned the use of kidnapping as a war weapon in the 2 English-speaking regions of the country. He called on government to take up its responsibility and protect the citizens and find solutions to the crisis. Listen to him.
Situation that kidnapping is now being used as a tool of war. And not only that, they were kidnapped, but I saw the video of one of them who was beheaded. That's very unfortunate. It's a very barbaric situation. For those who are not involved in active hostility, they are not supposed to be a target. But I think also that we should be honest enough to ask ourselves, how did we get here? These were peaceful protesters who started in 2016 and 2017, and that has morphed into an armed struggle because of the attitude of government. So it's incumbent on government to try to find a solution, to talk to those who have taken up arms against the state in a very genuine kind of discussion or dialogue, and to address some of the fundamental issues. And I believe that a solution could come from having a federation in this country. I don't see why it's a taboo. I don't see why they are scared. I read the other day that the Minister of Higher Education, who is also communication guy of the CPDM, was saying that the CPDM is not now is ready to talk about federation. I don't know whether I got him what. So I think these are things that we need to address, because whoever is being killed in the conflict is a Cameroonian. The country loses, and the government owes a duty to protect the civilian population. So whatever is going on, the government is responsible to ensure that we put an end to this mayhem.
And at a time when gross human rights violations and abuse are being observed in the northwest, southwest, far north regions, the three regions affected by serious security crisis with the cessation war in the northwest and southwest regions and the Boko Haram insurgency in the far north region, and across the board, the human rights defenders are now strengthening the know-how, stepping up the know-how of leaders, particularly young leaders, on issues of human rights. Some of them have been brought together here in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, by the Friedrich Ebert Foundation and the European Union in connection or in partnership with the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, in a training on human rights issues. And they are being equipped, they are being taught in national and international human rights dispositions, human rights laws, which they are expected to apply as leaders and as future leaders. They have been going through this training for the past close to 48 hours now, and the training continues. And Barrister Agbo Bala is one of the facilitators. He talked to us about this training and the importance of this training being brought to young leaders from across the board. Listen to him.
For young leaders, they have done other trainings in political institutions and economy, and we felt that it was necessary for them to imbibe a culture of human rights, because it's easier when you grow up in the culture. When you get into power in a position of responsibility, you will implement and you would fight for the protection and promotion of human rights. So that's why we felt that these young leaders are from all the regions in Cameroon. So they are having a 3-day training sponsored by Friedrich Ebert, financed by European Union, and the training is done. I'm facilitating a training with 2 of my team from the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. It's very engaging training. I think the young leaders are very excited with it. And we touch on other things. We touch about corruption and human rights. We touch about the African Commission of Human Rights. We touch about the human rights situation in Cameroon, the crimes against humanity being committed in parts of the country. We looked at also freedom of expression. Don't forget, most of these young leaders, they would always have problems with freedom of expression. And over the past 3 years, we've seen what has happened to political parties and civil societies who want to hold rally, freedom of expression and assembly. So that's also something that we looked at it, how you can bring a complaint to the African Commission. We've had rights which have been violated, but most people don't know that when they have exhausted domestic remedy, they can take the matter to the African Commission and also to the Human Rights Council. We showed how civil society organizations present their complaints in front of the Human Rights Council. So it's been a very exhaustive training, and I think that they have learned something from it.
And some of the young leaders who are attending that training here in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, spoke to us, and they said that they have received already a lot of information that's going to help them in their leadership and even in their future civil society and political ambitions as leaders of tomorrow. Listen to some of them.
Indécente et choquante.
During an interministerial meeting on the recent sex tape of a journalist and a young girl, Malika, that was circulated on social media on June 16, 2021, the shocked Minister of Women Empowerment and the Family first questioned the aim of authors of the video on a Wednesday marking the International Day of the African Child.
Quel message voulait-il passer?
Minister Marie Teresa Benaondoa, while underlining the gravity of this act to the victim, says such acts are uncountable and frequent. That such violence on minors, which cannot be described, are committed mostly in schools, private homes, bars, offices, motels, and other open places.
Des bars dansants et cabarets et d'autres lieux ouverts.
According to the minister, the judiciary does not entertain this act.
L'exploitation sexuelle des jeunes et des enfants.
By committing such an act, the authors of the sex video grossly violated the fundamental rights of the minor, she says.
Proclamé par le préambule de notre loi fondamentale et contenu dans les instruments juridiques de protection des droits de l'enfant ratifiés par notre pays.
Authors going by the Cameroon Penal Code have to be punished.
L'acte en lui-même est déjà ignoble.
She admits it is punishable by the Penal Code and denounces with her last energy such an act that exposes the young girl or child as a sex object.
Tels actes odieux et malsains qui chosifient la jeune femme en font un objet sexuel dénué de toute valeur.
Minister Marie-Thérèse Abena calls for an interministerial action to this.
J'en appelle à une synergie d'action.
Synergistically, she stresses they can conquer this phenomenon in collaboration with the government, political, judiciary, traditional and religious authorities, not leaving out the civil society.
Merci soit menée contre les auteurs.
Many thus question if this call to work in synergy alone will be sufficient enough to arrest this phenomenon that continues to gain popularity on social media.
That was Cameroon's Minister of Women's Empowerment and the Family condemning the sexual exploitation of young girls and women in Cameroon, and of course that coming after the circulation of a sex tape in which a young girl is exposed to jungle justice, and of course she's been seen in that video, and that is what provoked that statement, that press statement by the Minister of Women's Empowerment and the Family, Marie-Thérèse Abena Ondua, who says that such acts should be condemned and those involved in the exploitation of young girls in sexual abuse and violations must be punished according to the law. Now we come back to this report on two young women who died in mysterious circumstances in Twi in the Mbamani Nubu Division Center region of the Republic of Cameroon, and another woman who gave birth and dumped the baby in a stream in Bafusam in the West region. Smanjik and Gabriel.
Inhabitants of Ntui taken aback as lightning killed two ladies, Marie Valentine Ena and Beatrice Ondobo, at the mortuary of Ntui in Bama and Nubu division of the Center region. Many turned out with dismay to see the lifeless bodies of the two ladies. The lightning struck them while in their farms. We went to the farm together for her to show me where I will work, after which she went to her own end to clean her cassava farm. The family is still to come to terms with the disappearance of these two, as according to them it is mysterious owing to the fact that the two who died were struck by lightning. Their bodies were supposed to be dark in color, but on the contrary, the lifeless bodies were normal. When I saw the corpse on the bike, it seems it was just rain that has fallen on them. I know that if thunder strikes someone, he or she becomes dark, but their case is different.
Le corps se transforme. Donc quand je vois le corps est intact. Elle a tout son corps. Elle a un teint clair.
The State Council has ordered for an investigation on the demise of these two. At Banengo, Gabon Ba in Bafoussam 1 subdivision, West region of Cameroon, it is the lifeless body of a newborn baby that was discovered beneath a bridge. The discovery was made by some kids who were in search of items that could be recycled. As I went in search of old dresses, I saw the baby wrapped in a paper. Then I called my uncle. In anger, the inhabitants of Banengo, Gabon Ba, are asking why a woman will take in for 9 months and later kill the child. A woman who keeps a child for 9 months in her stomach and kills later is a devil. While investigations are on course to track down the lady who must have committed this act, the lifeless body of the baby was handed over to the Army Rescue Unit, who buried the corpse later.
A popular hotel which just went operational here in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, is engulfed by flames, and the fire incident broke out earlier this evening at the Terminus roundabout here in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, and the Metropolitan Marriott Hotel has been attacked or has been consumed by flames. Sections of the hotel were consumed by flames earlier today, and the fire incident broke out earlier today, and of course rescue soldiers arrived at the scene earlier too in an attempt to quench the flames. We shall be coming back to this in our subsequent news editions. Now, news out of Cameroon. A new United Nations report estimates that the 12-year conflict in northeast Nigeria has contributed to the death of nearly 350,000 people, and not 35,000 as earlier said. More than 90% of the dead victims are children, and the United Nations Development Program says that for every person killed directly in the fighting, at least 9 other persons, 9 other lives are lost because of the impact of the war. And since Boko Haram launched its first attack in 2009, close to 2 million people have fled their homes in the states of northeast Nigeria. Agricultural production has been hit hard, and leading to disease and hunger. Facilities, including health centers and schools, have been destroyed and are still being destroyed in the fight against Boko Haram. And of course, the situation has continued for over 12 years today. This is where we end the first part of this newscast. Talking Point is up next. Thank you for staying with us in Talking Point. A child protection expert is joining us today from South Africa, Joan van Niekerk. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all your listeners and yourself.
Going to be talking about child protection in this edition of Talking Point, and I begin with some information from the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, and of course that the concerning recent statistics about children, notably in West and Central Africa. And in West and Central Africa, according to the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, there are several cases of violence, abuse, and exploitation of children in West and Central Africa. The situation is tragic, as indicated by the United Nations International Children's Fund. As far as Central and West Africa is concerned, what's the situation in South Africa where you are?
Well, I think we're also seeing acts of abuse against children here. And some people believe this is made worse because of the COVID situation. We had a long lockdown period during which children were not at school. And, when things that are happening at home that are bad for children, you often find that children confide in their school teachers. So without school, children had no one to talk to about what was happening at home. Now that lockdown has eased, what we are faced with is a lot of unemployment in both the formal and informal sectors. In fact, the unemployment in South Africa is the highest it has ever been. And this has an impact on children as well. We are concerned about the fact that many children are involved in child labor in an effort to bring money and food into their families, and very vulnerable to exploitation because they are hungry. And hunger, unfortunately, makes children extremely vulnerable to all sorts of abuses.
Issues like sexual abuse and sexual violence against children, especially young girls?
Yes, we do see a lot of sexual violence against children. Sadly, a lot of sexual violence against children is committed by older children in their teens. And I think that this, in fact, is not a new thing in South Africa, but we have enormous concerns about that because it starts a pattern of aggressive sexual behavior early on in the child's life. And that is really very problematic. The other thing is during COVID, our services to children were not operating as they should have. And what it meant was when children were in urgent need of rescue or assistance from welfare authorities, because the welfare authorities were in lockdown, as were families, they were not able to respond promptly to the needs of children. So that was also a problem. But, the last year we've had quite serious COVID infection, waves of infection in South Africa, and they certainly have contributed to the increased vulnerability of children.
Vulnerability of children, violation, abuse of their rights is a problem cutting across the continent, especially in the countries hit by security and socio-political tensions. What's your take about the manner in which children are being protected, or the efforts of government authorities to protect children in different African countries, starting from South Africa, where you are, where there is a Child Protection Act?
Indeed, I think this is very, very problematic. And when one looks at Africa as a whole, even in sub-Saharan Africa, it's not just West Africa, one is very concerned about the exploitation of children through conflict and through being used both as child soldiers, but also being used as prostitutes by the very soldiers themselves as well. We also share with the area in the west of Africa our deep concern about the violation of girls, the kidnapping of girls by Boko Haram. I think that this is something that is a very cruel act against a child. It not only removes them from their education, it removes them from their families. They are open to being influenced by extremists. And yes, we are very, very concerned. We share that concern with our African neighbors. We also have a lot of concern about the trafficking of children. In Southern Africa, we do know that South Africa is used as a transit country, as well as a country that receives trafficked girls. We have concerns about Lesotho, Lesotho also is experiencing the trafficking of children into South Africa, where they're brought into the brothels, and the import of children also from Asian countries, or young girls from Asian countries. So trafficking is a form of exploitation that we are seeing and have enormous concerns about, because these children are mainly trafficked into sex work, into brothels, into places where they are exploited by older men.
Cameroon, for example, today there is a situation concerning internally displaced children forced out of their homes, sometimes in the absence of their parents, who are equally displaced to other directions by the violence, the conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, and in the far north with the Boko Haram insurgency and so on. And many of those children are abandoned to themselves. Many of them are living in very deplorable and difficult conditions, some of them getting into criminal activities, some of them getting into prostitution and other issues, other activities to survive. What do you think about this?
Indeed, very, very concerning. And I think that we really, those of us who are concerned about human rights and children's rights, really need to advocate and put pressure on the African Union for countries who are members of the African Union to look at what they can collectively do to protect children. I am sure that if countries in Africa put their minds together, they would be able to do so much more to protect children from involvement in conflict, from exploitation, and the things that make children so vulnerable. Of course, we do see that there's also very poor crops in Africa at the moment, so we have concerns about famine as well in certain parts of Africa. But we need, as a region, as the African region, to take the rights of children far more seriously, to take more seriously a collective response, a country collective response across the region to be protecting children from armed conflict, to protecting children from being trafficked, to protecting children from being abducted, as so many children have in the west of Africa. So I believe there is a case for all the human and child rights organizations to get together as a collective and ask for the opportunity to take this problem to the African Union and say, you leaders, what are you doing? What are you doing to support each other to protect children? It's not something one country can necessarily do on its own. If borders are not properly kept, if some countries harbor those who commit acts of abduction and so on, we've got to act as a collective.
The legal framework that was put in place by the Organization for African Unity, and which is being enforced by what is today known as the African Union. I'm talking about the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children. What's your take on the implementation of this legal framework by member countries to protect children?
Well, I think first of all, the African Union has to put pressure on African countries. Every single African country should have signed that and ratified it. In other words, through ratification, they make it part of their domestic law. And I do think also that the African Committee of Experts on Children should be taken more seriously and given a proper budget from which they can work. It's a very underfunded committee. it unfortunately is unable to travel to the various countries in which there are human rights abuses of children and child rights abuses of children, in which families who want to protect their children are unprotected themselves, and so on. I believe that we really do have to lobby for this. The African Charter means nothing if a country is not seriously committed to making sure that what they have signed and ratified is seriously brought into their domestic space and also into inter-country, inter-regional, the regions within Africa, those regions into inter-regional working together. For example, I think the South African development community can do a lot to prevent child trafficking across borders, can do a lot to make sure that children are not abducted across borders, can do a lot in order to support each other's child rights protection, and the same with the West African sub-region as well. But basically, the leader needs to come from the top. The leadership needs to come from the top, and that is from the African Union itself.
Now, in South Africa, tell us about the Child Protection Act. How is it being implemented there, and how far has its implementation gone to ensure the protection of the rights of children in the country?
Well, one thing South Africa has done very well at is reforming legislation relating to children. We have very, very progressive legislation. The problem is in the implementation. I think, as the African continent knows at the moment, we're really struggling with corruption at the highest levels of government. And when that happens, it's really stealing money that can be used for the advancement of our population, including children. And when we look at the implementation of the Children's Act, the implementation is limited by the resources we have available. So for every million that's stolen by politicians who have access to contracts, tenders, all that kind of stuff, which has enabled the corrupt misuse of massive amounts of money. For every cent that is stolen, you're really taking that away from human rights and particularly children's rights. Children have a very limited space in which they can fight for themselves. Yes, we can talk about child participation, we can give children the opportunity to participate, but unless adults behave responsibly with the resources they have, children still suffer because children do not have access to those same resources. And so when you look across Africa, unfortunately, we're a region that has been what I call dogged by corruption over the years. And now we have this massive problem in South Africa. I'm sure we're not the only country that has a problem with corruption. It is like a disease in itself because hunger kills children. So when children can't be fed because someone has stolen the money, it really means you have killed those children as a politician. And I think it's about time we faced our politicians with their irresponsible behavior and said, enough is enough. We want that money to be redirected into the lives of children, to educate them properly, to protect them adequately, to make sure they are fed, because hunger makes children very, very vulnerable to being sexually abused and to child labor and other things, trafficking. We want our children to be properly fed, properly protected, to be able to live in peace in all of Africa. Stop
the problem of
money.
corruption. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, as I was saying, politicians must stop stealing the money.
corruption, it's something that is a cankerworm that has continued eating deep into the fabrics of African countries, with state or government officials accused of stealing, or better still, embezzling billions of francs CFA. And you said it's time to rise up and say enough is enough, to put an end to this. How to do this, and what is expected of the common man to be able to fight this problem?
In most African regions, we are working towards democracy. And you can use your vote. You can use your vote to say enough is enough in a democratic government. But I think it's important too for every person to put their voices together as a collective and put pressure on the politicians, moral pressure on the politicians, in order to behave in a responsible way. We also, as individuals in our communities, can keep an eye on our children in the communities. We always talk about government must do this, government must do that. And yes, government has big responsibilities, but we have responsibilities too, as common people in our communities, to keep an eye on the child, to share what we do have with those who don't have, particularly to make sure that children are fed. I often think of the story of Christ, who took the little boy with his 2 loaves and, 2 fish and 5 loaves. I can't remember if it was 2 loaves or 5 fish, but anyway, and fed a whole multitude. And sometimes when you share what you have, you can do so much more than if you keep it to yourself and be selfish about the rights and the opportunities of others to eat and have what they need to have.
Thank you, Joan Van Nyekek. Thank you for joining us today from South Africa. Thank you for your time.
Well, I want to thank you for taking on the issue of children's rights, and I want to thank your listeners for listening as well. And I just want to say, please look after the children in your communities. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today. Sergio will be yours in some minutes with Equinoxe. Stay with us.